This is starting. Okay. Sorry, we got a little bit late start there, but I think we'll be fine. Okay, so our next topic is status reporting. And for the PMs, this is going to become very important because it's your way to, I'm sorry, can you guys see? Let me make sure it's sharing. Okay, there we go. It's going to be your way to communicate your current project health so that it gets consumed into the dashboard that is produced for portfolio health reviews. And that dashboard is what is used to present to senior IT leadership on how well we're delivering to our commitments for our projects. So the information that you submit in your status report, and I'll show that a little bit later, will feed into a portfolio health dashboard that goes to our senior IT leadership. And it's also your way to communicate out the risk associated with your project so that no one's taken by surprise if something goes awry later that you did everything you could to prevent but still happened. It's also a way that when things do happen on your project to get help from the right level of leadership to course correct, you know, and that kind of thing. So I would say if there's any message about project status reporting, it's be as transparent as possible, because it is much worse to say I'm green, 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 and then go red than it is to say I'm yellow. I have these major concerns. I need this is the help I need from you. And then I feel like we can get back to green. So that would be one thing, is it's important to be transparent. Being yellow or red is not necessarily a reflection of your performance on that project. A lot of times it's just a situation where it's a risky project and you've done everything you can to mitigate it and things still happen that you need help addressing. So definitely don't try and be as transparent as possible. If your project has major risk, make it yellow so that people know those risks exist and that they're not surprised when something happens. If your project is having major issues, make it red so that leadership can start the conversation about how do we correct course, or, you know, do you need me to go get help from another team, you know, so that you can, those conversations are coming to light. I know this IT leadership, and I can tell you it is much worse for them to be surprised later on in the project than you be transparent throughout. The second thing that I would say is when you're doing your status reporting, make sure you're thinking through not just why I'm red or why I'm yellow, but what are you as a PM doing to help course correct? What do you need from them to help you do that? So make sure your status is not just reflecting what's going wrong, but the work you're putting in to get it right, or the problem solving that you're doing, or, you know, what additional barriers exist that potentially, you know, can be escalated and get help and move you on the right track. So I would say just at a high level, think about those things as you're reporting your status out on your project. I'll go ahead and get started. So just high level reporting guidance. So, you know, we're expecting you're meeting with your teams weekly, that you have a good handle on essentially where your project is performance-wise, just a second. And that you're ready on the Fridays when status report is due to communicate that. Normally you're meeting with your teams more frequently and trying to, as a former PM, I can tell you a day didn't go by that I didn't know what was happening on my project. So it's generally not that odd. The first and third Friday of every month is when your bi-weekly status report is due. You will see notices, emails coming out from the PMO reminding you. But first and third Friday is when they are due in ServiceNow. and I'll go through how you create it in ServiceNow. The first of the month's status report is what goes into the monthly portfolio health review process, which I will also cover with you. So if we're just thinking high level timeline, make sure you're ready first and third Friday to submit your status report, and make sure that you're being as transparent as possible and that you're thinking like a problem solver. So at an executive level, you're describing what's happening and you're very clear about what you're doing to mitigate situations or what help you need in mitigating those situations.
Sharon, Ayushi, just to add a note here for all the PMs, this month the project health review meeting is on 29th of October. So we will be considering, email just went out today. We will be considering the status report as of 3rd Friday, which is the upcoming Friday for the project health review meeting this month. So I just wanted to remind everyone.
Thank you, Ayushi. I appreciate that. So normally it's the first, but this month we're going to delay it because the meeting got delayed by a week.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So this month it's your third. In any case, you should be doing the same for both. So hopefully that doesn't affect the status reporting that you're putting in. The overall process for status reporting is just in ServiceNow is where we submit it. So you'll access ServiceNow, navigate, and I have more detailed slides coming. So this is just high level. You'll navigate to project status portal, select your project for update, insert a new status report, update scope, cost, resource, schedule, confirm the accuracy of the additional information that's in there from a financials perspective and just high level overview perspective. You'll update the overall status and then save it. And then you're going to look at adding any risk that need to be added to ServiceNow. Once you've done all of that, you'll obtain the necessary approvals from your GPM and click approved by GPM and then save it. So that's at a very high level. Here are some screenshots to kind of show you where it is in ServiceNow. So hopefully by now, if you're a PM, you have access to this project portfolio management in ServiceNow. That is where we're doing all, again, tools will change later this year, early next year, but currently in ServiceNow is where we're managing the information about the project, as well as managing change with the project and status reporting for the project. So there's this project portfolio management section in ServiceNow, and you'll see here, there's a project status portal. So if you click on that, and you can go to your project, and it says My Status Reports, and then click Insert. You'll see it up here in the top right, and that'll allow you to insert a new status report. Once you have a new status report available to you, just kind of as that flow said, you'll always be pending when you first start, and you'll have a status date. Ensure that it's the most recent date that's reflected. And then you'll notice at the bottom here, there are tabs that go across. Some of these are pre-populated and some you're populating with this new status report. The ones that are in red down here should already have some information that was pre-populated. That's just general information about your project that was either provided at the beginning or managed through the justification or change request process. So you'll have your IT team, project details, project dates, and project financials. Please check project dates and project financials to make sure they are correct, because they are being pulled into that dashboard. If they are not correct, please reach out to the ops team and work if you don't know how to update those, so we can make sure the most accurate information is there. I will tell you in some cases, and I've seen this question multiple times, I can't change my financials until I get approval. However, I know this isn't correct. In that case, you're going to want to reach out to the ops team, because we want to work together to make sure in the dashboard it gets corrected, even if it's not correct in ServiceNow yet. So if you have your new projected dates and you have your new projected dollar spend, we need to know those, even if it hasn't gone through full justification yet. So we want to make sure you're reviewing this and that it is correct. So that's kind of here. As you could see, general status things, the overall status, schedule, cost, resource, and scope are ones that you'll be entering as part of this. So verify the ones that are highlighted here, and then you would start entering your status. We started with schedule first. So you'll go in and what you'll see is you'll have a schedule color that you'll select, as well as a place to enter comments on your schedule. Considerations for the comments when you're thinking about what you should be asking yourself when you enter this: is there a negative schedule variance from plan? If so, what caused that delay? And will the delay be propagated throughout, or do I have a plan to bring that in? And what is that plan? So really think about it from the perspective of not just it's rescheduled. See, what's in here to me is not a good example. It's not just it was rescheduled. Why was it rescheduled? What are we doing to bring it back on track? What help do you need to get it back on track? Really need these comments to be a little bit more meaty around, like, we have a problem, we're trying to solve it, this is what I'm doing to solve it, and this is the help I need from you. Related to the color, just level set on how to choose which color is in there. Green means you have no major risk and all your milestones are on track. So you have some risk, but you have none that are with a probability of over 50% of impacting your project. If you have any risk, that doesn't mean that it actually hit your project already, or that you have a change request you're planning, or that you already missed the date. You could be on track, but there is a good probability that something is going to affect your dates. You want to turn it yellow, and you want to make sure the comments reflect that. So you want to say, hey, I just found out that this particular contractor is leaving. I haven't missed any dates yet. They've been delivering, but I think there's a major risk that they're going to be able to replace someone with this amount of knowledge that could keep us on track. So you want to escalate that so that we can start thinking about, hey, do we have anyone else in house? Do we need to look at another you want to start problem solving around that. So you want to escalate that to yellow if the probability is higher than 50% that you will get impacted by something, even if it hasn't impacted you yet. And this is kind of part of when we talk about the transparency and making sure the right conversations are being had at the right levels. And then last, if there is an issue that exists that is impacting your schedule, you are red. So I know there's a lot of controversy around that because people feel like, well, maybe I'll be able to do something, and but if you've not resolved it yet and it is impacting your schedule, we want to turn it to red. You may turn back to green. And I will tell you, if you're getting a justification document or a change request done to move the dates on your project due to an issue, the answer isn't, I'm going to be green next week because I'm getting this justification done. You really want to think about, what has the risk actually been closed out, or does this risk still exist? And you may get hit with another change request later. If the answer is the second, then you want to make sure you put it red, you explain what happened and say, we haven't really resolved this risk yet. This risk still exists and could impact this project again, even though we have justification for moving this date this time. You will see later and some of the metrics and the things we're looking at is project change requests, how many are happening on your project. So we want to get better at figuring out, have we resolved the risk that caused the problem, or is it propagating every few months and we just doing a bunch of other different justification documents. So turning green is not because you got justification. Turning green is because you solved the problem, or have a short-term solution that you think is going to solve the problem. The next item is cost. So very similar to schedule when you're thinking about cost. Is there a variance from your actuals to your budget? So kind of how are you forecasting? How are you trending? Are you trending where you're burning, your burn rate is a little bit higher than it was every month, and it looks like by the time you hit the end of this, you're going to be way above where you want to be. So looking at that kind of stuff, and your controller should be helping you with that as well, as well as the scheduler for the previous. So if the controller is telling you your burn rate is, this, and you're burning about 10% higher than you expected in labor this month, and then 10% higher than that next month, and then 10% higher than that next month, by the time you hit the end of this project, you have a problem. So those are the kind of things that you want to start reporting out and solving, and showing what solutions you're putting in place here before you need the justification document at the end. So really, how are you trending from a financials perspective? And then, are there any risks to your project or to your budget that has a probability that's really high? You want to talk about that. Hey, I have a risk out there because I'm getting comments from the vendor that this is a much more complex design than they had originally planned. We're going to get an estimate from them, but making you guys aware there's a risk at this point that we may be, 50% over budget kind of thing. So you want to get the information, be as, concise and articulate as possible and succinct as possible, because this is an executive level audience. But really just providing the information that is needed to explain the problems, and then what your proposed solutions are for those, or what help you need. And same here with cost and risk. So you have a risk out there and it's 50% or higher that you're going to impact your budget. We want to make it yellow and mention that. And then same for issues. If there's already something impacting your budget, even if you're planning on submitting a justification document, there's an issue that you need to communicate. People need to know we're spending more money than we had originally planned. So this is a way to communicate that to your senior leadership. Resources. So this is a big one here, because as I mentioned pretty early on, like one of the big things that we heard consistently was resource capacity is impacting my projects. And there's not a good way to manage resource capacity. So we're working on that with our resource loaded schedules and hopefully get that resource management in place that allows us to do that. However, this is your place in your status report where you can really speak to how's your resource allocation working for you in your project. So, do you have concerns about it? Do you, are they being prioritized out of your project? Are you seeing potential overlap with other projects that may cause delays? So you may have pushed out a little and now you're overlapping with another critical project that requires the same resources. So this is where we bring those sort of things to light. In some cases, this level of leadership can help set priorities, right? So if your project is a priority over another one, we want to make sure we're identifying that there's an issue or a conflict or potential risk, so that we can get those addressed as early as possible to not impact your project or whatever the other high priority project is. But this is where you would bring up that conversation. Scope is another one. So this is really around what risk exists to your scope. I will say, if you are working with a part of the business that historically has done a lot of last minute changes to requirements or last minute changes to scope, it's a good conversation to have with the GPM who's maybe seen projects coming out of this group before. You're going to want to have a risk out there related to that. And you're going to want to think about what are ways that I can maybe prevent that from becoming an issue. Is potentially a pilot an option, or getting something in front of them so they can visually see what it's going to look like? Or, if they generally can't commit to UAT, how do I identify backups for them and have conversations with the right level of leadership on their side? Or maybe contract resources that I can bring in a little bit earlier to mitigate that. May cost a little bit, but if I can get them up to speed, I can intermingle them with the business side and, that kind of thing. So when it comes to scope and resources, I just want you guys to be very mindful that it's not always imposed on us. There are things that we should be thinking about, but if you feel like you're working in an area that scope changes a lot, you want to make sure you have the risk out there, that you're thinking about the potential impact, and then you're communicating that in your status reports, in your portfolio health. And then, you know, are there any showstoppers kind of thing? And that's really starting to think about, if this is an area that requests a lot of last minute scope changes, what's our ability to leverage additional phases? So just because they say they want it now doesn't mean that we can't negotiate. Hey, you know, we only have this budget for this project, this time for this project. Can I initiate a phase 2? And you wait for that phase to get like whatever this is additionally, that kind of thing. So there are some options there to problem solving where scope exists. It's not always just imposed on us. We can be a bit proactive about scope and resource risk. And that's kind of just what the thought is behind that. Other than that, it's the same. If you have 50% chance something's going to impact your scope, you're going to want to make sure folks know about that. And then overall status is really the one we're saying do last. So once you've gone through all of these, if any of your schedule, cost, resource, and scope are yellow, you're going to want to make the overall status yellow on your project. Same for red. If any of those are red, you're going to want to make the overall status red with the proper explanations in your executive summary as to what is happening, what are you doing to solve it, or what help do you need? And be very specific. So I'm working with so-and-so, I'll have an answer by this date. You know, don't make it general, be very specific about what you're doing to solve it. So they know, okay, by next month, we should have an answer. So we should be good, you know, to check back next month and see how that's going. As you can see here, executive summary, what potential events could impact your ability to deliver? Do you have contingency if your schedule gets pushed, if the budget gets, you know, if you have any impact to those things, did you build in contingency, or do you have any left for this, or will we have to ask for additional money? What are your major project decisions that are still open? So that could still impact your budget and your schedule pretty, you know, heavily. And then are there any previous issues that you think may reappear? So this is generally, you know, we solved it last time, but I kind of feel like this resource is going to be a problem again, or this area is going to be, you know, and it may reoccur. You want to, you know, be clear in your executive summary that those are your potential risks going forward. And then you have last week's accomplishments, key activities. Again, here, I would be very concise, keep an executive audience in mind. I wouldn't be super wordy. I'd just be very clear, you know, this is what we did, or this is what we didn't do, still have left to do. This is what we're working on next week. This is when we plan to have that done. Be very, very concise, very executive level for these. Okay, and then once you've done your status reports, done your status report and click save, you can enter new risk. So as you see here, there is a risk tab that allows you to enter new risk, revisit existing risks, and update those. As I mentioned early on, risk management is going to become very important going into next year, as it's going to be a hot topic for compliance reporting. So your risk registers will start to be audited to make sure your risks are if-then statements, meaning I'm not just saying, you know, my risk is storm. My risk is if a storm occurs during this month, this is how my project is impacted. So it's a little bit more of a clear, definite, clear wording of what is the risk and what is impacted if that risk becomes an issue. And then, so you'll see a lot more of that going into next year. So I would say, we'll get to risk management a little later, but definitely you should be checking in on this. I would say every week you should be thinking about what can go wrong and adjusting your risk accordingly, and not just documenting them, but actually actively trying to mitigate them and making that clear here. So what are you trying to do? You need contract resources to help mitigate it. You know, what are you actually doing to help prevent that from becoming an issue? I'm doing a pilot because my users can't make up their mind, so I'm going to give them a visual so that they, we get a little bit more concrete in our communication, things like that. So that's your risk reporting. And then once you've done all of that, then you will get your approval from your GPM or your group product manager. Oops, sorry. And change this to GPM approved. I'm sorry, yeah. So that's it for status reporting. And then I'll do portfolio health and then come back to for any questions, because portfolio health kind of fits right into this. So it's just a good next step. Let me see here. Okay. All right, portfolio health review process. Let me see. Sorry, I'm trying to do a software update on the machine at the same time. Okay, so this is the process flow for portfolio health. So you submit your report, status report, first and third week, Friday of the month. The data is extracted by some of the very great, talented folks on this team that know how to get data out of ServiceNow and into report format or dashboard format. And then an initial cut of the portfolio health dashboard material is created. Once that is created, it is sent out to the project teams, and then I'm sorry, it's emailed out. This is Energy Cloud. Oh, because Energy Cloud. So the transformational program has a little bit of a side process related to it, but because they're doing status reporting at a higher level. So we want to stay consistent with that. So it will be extracted from ServiceNow for all projects. Energy Cloud goes through a little bit of a different process in that the PMO reaches out to that team to put that information together. Once all of that is done, a status report assessment is done. And we'll go a little bit further down. And that's really just a series of questions, quality sort of questions, that the PMO ops team looks at to determine, is this at the level we want to be communicating with executives, or do we have follow-up questions, or some inconsistencies in the information? Like it says, the commitment date shows last month, but we say we're on track, that kind of thing. So they're looking for inconsistencies in data, right level of information, comprehensiveness to facilitate an executive level conversation. So if they don't need follow-up, if they do, they'll work with you to get that. If you don't need follow-up, then it will go into, let's see, you'll go create your updates. This is basically the cycle you go through with the PMO. And then all the prep material then is updated and ready for these PHR prep meetings. That will be distributed out. So this deck will be distributed out. And this is the deck that will be used to communicate with that executive level leadership, as well as the SLT, the senior leadership team and IT. Then there's a host of prep meetings. So each tower has its own prep meeting where all of their projects are reviewed, any follow-up questions are asked. And really, this is the PMs, GPMs, and tower leads opportunity to make any corrections that they would want prior to this hitting the CIDO and the SLT. So really, you want to come into this meeting ready to verify everything in there is correct and what you want to communicate to that team. Any additional status notes will come out of that. The material is then finalized, distributed to Zishan as well as his senior leadership team. And then the meetings occur, which I think I heard was what, the 27th or 29th this month?
Yeah, 29th.
Yeah, 29th. So that's when that portfolio health review meeting. Normally, these prep meetings are the second week of the month, and then this is the third. Just this month, these prep meetings are going to be the third week with the fourth week being when we're going to do the health review with leadership. So this I thought was important for you guys to get some insight. As the team's looking at the information that's submitted in the project status reports, they're really reviewing it to make sure it's ready for that conversation at the end of the month. So here are just some questions that you can think about as you're putting your status report together to make sure that messaging reflects what we want to say to that leadership team. So overall, make sure you complete your status report, and you will get pinged by the PMO if it's not there. So please just make sure that is submitted and on time, because the information that sits in there will be consumed into that initial draft of the portfolio health review deck. Is it comprehensive, fully developed, and are all the areas complete? So not just the overall status, but did you go through all the tabs and make sure it's a very comprehensive status report? When it comes to the schedule health, are all the, just as a general look at this, do all my milestones seem reasonable? So a lot of times things that Zishan will pick up on is, I see you're planning on completing testing by, in 2 weeks, but I noticed you're still doing some development now. Make sure your milestones are reflecting an accurate picture of how you're going to do this work. If something seems unreasonable, that team will probably notice it, and that's not where you want it to be noticed, because then it just it takes away a little of the credibility of your plan. So you want to make sure your milestones reflect a sound plan and seem reasonable. Are there risks or issues or decisions that need to be noted that is making your plan seem less reasonable? So even if it looks reasonable, but testing is probably not going to start on time, what's causing that? What's the issue there that potentially you can escalate, or risk there that you can escalate to help move that along and up your chances of making that date? If you are red, do you have a new estimated delivery date, and what is your plan to get the project on track? So it may not be that you can go back and pull it back, the date back in. It may be that you need a new adjusted date, and then you can say, this is what I did to correct it. Now I have this new adjusted date. I'm confident in this. That you want to make sure that's all captured, not just, hey, we're running behind. That doesn't give really enough information for those guys to really understand. Is it an ongoing problem? Have you solved it already? Do we have new commitment dates? Do the business partners know about the new date? Do they understand the issue that occur? Have we really resolved the issue, or is this going to keep moving us? That kind of thing. So you want to make sure that's what you're including in your status update. Do the colors for schedule and overall match? So a lot of times people will say, I'm red with my schedule, but then they'll show green overall, which conflicts in messaging in some way. So we want to make sure all of that's correct. And is there schedule float to deal with some of this? So if you want to highlight a risk to your project because you've had a slight delay with one of your milestones, but overall you think you can still absorb it into your project with the float you've built in for contingency, so the committed date is not going to move out. You want to make sure you're clear about that. You can articulate those risks and articulate that you're good to consume that. It's not going to impact your overall commitment date, and just make sure that that team's aware of that. Major risk. So you really want to be thinking about what can go wrong before it goes wrong. And that's kind of this first statement. So do you have any, major risks that there are things you can do to potentially prevent this from becoming an issue for your project? You want to make sure you're not waiting until it's an issue and then talking about the issue. It's much better when they knew it was a risk, you had the conversation, and then it impacts your project, because it shows active management of that. Is it clear what can go wrong to prevent delivery? So, essentially same thing. Cost, how you're performing to your baseline. So baseline is whatever the latest commitment was. In the future, we will start baselining schedules and forecast, but for now, it's basically what did you commit to and how are you performing against that? Looking at your contingency, similar to the last one, does your overall color match? Are there any cash flow concerns? Like if you're thinking about your burn rate, is there potential you won't be able to finish it this year? Maybe you can go live this year, but you still need to do work next year to hypercare, close it out, all of that kind of stuff. So is any of that at risk that you want to have a conversation about? Because budgets within year are very important for a utility company or for any company from a financial standpoint. And then also, if it's not just going to carry over, if your budget this year, you only budgeted this year and you don't request dollars for 2022 to carry over, then you don't have a budget for next year to finish your project. So you want to make sure you're communicating that kind of stuff and managing that stuff closely. So those are some of your kind of cash flow concerns that you could see come into play. And does it seem reasonable? If you show, I'm going to spend $100,000 in labor in December, how big are our teams? Like, do you really think that, internal labor can spend that much? Or is there another reason that it's so high? So if you have high dollars in later months, generally it's because you have a purchase that you need to make or something to that effect. Very seldom are you going to get a lot of labor in December with all the holidays. So just make sure that it's reasonable. And that is a question Zishan asks often. If something looks really high as far as spend in December, he's going to really want to know what's making up that spend and is it realistic? Change requests. So if you have a lot of change requests, this for 2021, it's kind of hard because it wasn't really tracked very well. It was hard to manage. And there's not a clear process. We will look at putting a clear process in place with a governing body to help move those change requests forward. That's on our list of things that we need to do early 2022. But going forward, it's really, have we solved the problem? So there's a lot of change requests because we can't get resources from the business to do UAT. So we just keep moving the date out. You're going to want to be able to explain that. If there are a lot of change requests, explain what's causing it. What are we doing to try and prevent it from impacting our project again? Or what help do you need? Like, do you need a conversation to happen between senior leadership and senior leadership somewhere else to get a commitment to this? Or you just need them to be aware it's not a priority for those folks. So I can keep moving the date, but maybe it makes sense to do something else with this project kind of thing. So it's important to think about what's causing your change and that clearly articulate that it was a risk that you managed and still turned into an issue. And you've either solved the problem going forward or it could potentially affect you in the future as well. And then resources, what are your risks there? Making sure you're clear about the risk to your resource. And is it anything that you can get, help with? If they were pulled for a higher priority, projects, this may be a place to confirm it is a higher priority project to get the conversation going with senior leadership about whether or not this person should be allocated to your project or not. And at minimum, if they say it's not a higher priority, you're made everyone aware of the impact that it's having. This is just a high level view of the kind of summary level information we want to keep in that portfolio health review. Going forward, I can see this changing somewhat as the information that group wants to see changes at a portfolio level. What you're probably going to really want to pay attention to is this. So this is the dashboards that get produced in that portfolio health review materials, and it's split by red, yellow, green projects. So again, don't hide that you're red if you're red to avoid being put on this list. I will tell you, I know this leadership is not okay with you going green to red. He calls it the watermelon effect. I think that's now an industry kind of term, but it is not okay to say you're green until you're completely off track. So you want to make sure you're having the right conversations in this forum so people are aware and it's not a surprise if something is heavily impacting your project. So if you're on this red list, just come in with what I said. Come in with, this is what's causing my problems. This is what I'm trying to do to resolve it, or I propose to do to resolve it in a very concise, succinct way. And this is the help that I need from you to make sure I can get back on track. And that's really where the conversation should be. And it should be a conversation that you're very comfortable having with your leadership, because they are there not just to say, oh, you're not doing a good job at managing this. They're there to help you be successful. So you want to make sure you're leveraging this conversation and this forum to get the help you need, and also to learn from others. I mean, if one goes red here and I'm working on a project that's doing something very similar, I can potentially listen in, hear what's happening with your project, take that away and do mitigating action on my project to avoid having the same issue. So also listen for lessons learned that are coming out of this. We do a retrospective in this forum every month, or I think we're trying to do them every month, which gives an opportunity for a past project to come in, tell you about what went wrong, what went right, and you can learn from that. So we want to make sure you're getting the support and the learning and that, you know, that you need from this, and I would not treat this as like, I'm on the, you know, I'm in the fire kind of situation. You want to be transparent and just make sure you're clear on your narrative there. And that's it for this. So we are about 14 minutes out now. So I will open it up if anyone has any questions. At this point, I don't see anything in the chat unless I'm missing it.
No, we don't have any questions in that.
Okay. If anyone wants to introduce any now, feel free. If not, we'll take another break.
Hi, Sharon.
Hi, Alan.
This is Helen. I had a question. I'm sorry, I sent it to the wrong person. But on that project status reporting in ServiceNow, does the controller have access and authorization to update that section, or is that solely for the project manager?
So the status report should be the project manager, because we want to make sure the person who is going to be in that meetings is submitting that. However, the information you're providing is feeding into that, because if you saw when I did at the beginning that project financials information
Yes.
that's in there is coming from the forecast and from the budgeting information that the controller should be updating. So the controller is responsible for that, and that gets propagated into their status report. So from that standpoint, the controller is providing input, but from a project status, because it's narrative, it's not like, you know, we want the PM telling that story, because they're the ones who's going to have to tell it in that meeting.
Okay, that narrative part is the clarification, so that the PM is responsible for the narration.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And because it's not like, here are my numbers, it's, this is what's going, you know, awry, or everything's on track. So like, I'm good. But that you want that story coming from the PM. PM is leveraging the information the controller is giving them so that they are managing the project. Again, they're ultimately responsible for delivery of that project. The controllers should be managing their financials to a level that they're feeding information to that PM that they can use to keep it on track, or that they can be aware of a potential risk, a potential issue that they can then mitigate and manage. The controller is just the vehicle for the information. The PM is driving that. Anyone else? And thank you, Helen. I'm happy to see some of our controllers on. All right, well, we have 11 minutes before we start the risk management section of this. So we will go ahead and take our break. I'm looking at my, sorry, I don't have the agenda up. If
Yeah,
anybody
we have
does,
risk management and cost estimation later,
what time does it start?
3:30.
Okay, so we have the 10 minutes here.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's go ahead and drop off for 10 minutes.